So here's how a relatively small group of voters could vote none of the above and deny both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton the presidency, made possible by the fact that the Electoral College, which determines our president, is a fucked up, exploitable system. And so here's how this would work. If a third-party candidate could get enough electors by winning just a few states, enough to prevent both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton from getting more than half of the Electoral College electors, if both of them could be prevented from hitting 270, the House of Representatives would choose our next president. The House of Representatives, when they vote, would choose between the three people, not two, the three people who get the most Electoral College electors. Now, at this point, it is confirmed that there are only two other people on planet Earth who will be on the ballot in enough states to be eligible to win the presidency. And those two people are former governor of New Mexico, Gary Johnson, and Massachusetts Dr. Jill Stein. This year, Gary Johnson is our best play if we want to deny both Trump and Hillary the presidency. The reason is that if the Democrats end up with the majority in the House of Representatives in the 115th Congress, they're likely to unite around Hillary Clinton, regardless of who the third choice would be. However, if the Republicans maintain control of the House of Representatives and the president ends up a Republican Party pick, well, the Republican Party is not exactly united in support of their candidate, Donald Trump. And because of the divide in the Republican Party, there is a realistic chance that a sizable number of Republicans would support Gary Johnson if he were the third choice on their ballot, because he was a Republican governor. Also, if faced with the choice of Trump or Johnson, there may very well be Democrats who end up supporting Johnson as well, if only to stop Donald Trump from becoming the next president of the United States. And so, even though it's a long shot, to give this option a try, your job is simple. Register to vote now and vote for Gary Johnson in November. If this election is close, a Gary Johnson win in even one state could make this scenario a reality.
I am so damn tired of being lied to. I don't think I can deny it anymore. You can't stick to your story if you think it flies, but I'm not gonna buy it anymore.
Hello, and thank you for listening to the 133rd episode of Congressional Dish. I'm your host, Jennifer Briney. Today's episode is a lesson in just how undemocratic our democracy is. This is an episode about the Electoral College. The Electoral College is the system that our founders created for us for picking the United States president. And in this system, 538 electors, who are human beings, vote for president. And then from there, things happen. And we'll get into those details. But for years and years and years, I've been telling you, you guys, you need to vote. Your vote matters. And that's true when it comes to Congress. I mean, I've been saying that for 4 years. And in this episode, you're going to learn that your vote for Congress is the most important thing that you can do to change this country. But one of the things that I learned in researching the Electoral College is that our votes for president really don't count. They just don't. Instead, your vote tells a portion of those 538 electors, a portion of those 538 human beings, how you liked them to vote for president. But there's no federal law requiring these electors to vote based on our votes. And so who are these people? Who are these electors? Well, the electors are chosen by political party insiders, and they're chosen after the election is over. And according to the National Archives, quote, political parties often choose electors to recognize their service and dedication to that political party, unquote. Since the founding of the Electoral College, there have been 82 electors who have just gone off and voted however they felt like it. For instance, in 1832, there were 32 electors from the state of Pennsylvania who just refused to vote for the voter-chosen vice president, just said no. And then it happened again 4 years later in 1836, when 23 electors from the state of Virginia refused to vote for the voter's choice of vice president because that white man lived with a black woman. Perhaps recognizing this as a problem, in 1952, the Supreme Court ruled that states can try and force their electors to vote the will of the people by creating their own state laws. But 21 states in our union of 50 haven't bothered to do so. But the problem is, even in the states that do have those laws tying the electors to the will of the voters, those states don't have the enforcement power that they need to really make it matter. Because disobeying a pledging law is a misdemeanor punishable by a $1,000 fine, which is nothing to these political party insiders who get to be electors and who are usually millionaires. And even more disturbing, no elector in United States history has ever been prosecuted for failing to vote as pledged. And so, despite that Supreme Court ruling, this shit has continued. In 1960, there were 15 electors that just went off the rails and voted against the voter-chosen candidate. And since then, it's only been one elector here and there that have voted their personal preferences, but it's happened continuously. It happened in 1968, 1972, 1976, 1988, 2000, and 2004. And so this is neither a distant nor a solved problem. And so basically, your vote for president is quite literally merely a suggestion to party insiders. And so let's just acknowledge right now, right up front, that the Electoral College system of voting for president is f***ed. There's no way around it. And less than 2 months before the next election, we have no way to change it. And so, just for kicks, let's see how we can play by the rules of this f***ed up game and win. Now, at this point, I have to take a minute and tell you my personal bias, and I promise this episode is not going to be about me, but I want to tell you what winning means to me, because I'm not going to pretend that I'm neutral here. And even though a lot of you know me and know where I'm coming from, this might be your first episode, so let me catch you up real quick. My bias is that I'm done with both of the Republican and Democratic parties. These two parties literally working together have rigged our elections so that no matter what, one of their parties always wins the presidency. A very clear example of how the two parties working together have rigged this system is how the two parties took over the presidential debates. And the presidential debates, while increasingly useless as far as substance is concerned, the debates are unfortunately the way that most low information voters are introduced to new candidates. If new candidates are allowed to participate, which since 1988 is a big if. Because you see, presidential debates used to be operated by the League of Women Voters, which is a nonpartisan group of people and which did not allow the big two parties to control how the debates were conducted. The big two parties didn't like not having control, and so they orchestrated quite the coup when they created the Commission on Presidential Debates to control the debates instead. The Commission on Presidential Debates was literally created by the heads of the big two parties, Frank Fahrenkopf and Paul Kirk. Frank Fahrenkopf was the chair of the Republican National Committee, the longest serving chair of the RNC this century, actually. And Paul Kirk was the head of the Democratic National Committee. And so the creators of the Commission on Presidential Debates, or CPD for short, were literally the leaders of the big two parties. And in case you're wondering about their motivation, when the CPD was created, Paul Kirk said, quote, "As party chairman, it's my responsibility to strengthen the two-party system," unquote. Their motivations were crystal clear. And so in 1988, the year of the coup, the chosen candidates from the big two parties created a list of demands that they wanted from the debate sponsors. Demands that included no follow-up questions, and they wanted the parties to be allowed to handpick the audience. Predictably, the League of Women Voters rejected their demands, but the new Commission on Presidential Debates gladly accepted them. And therefore, the candidates from the Democratic and Republican parties only participated in the CPD debate, killing the League of Women Voters debate by default. And the CPD, created and operated by the big two parties, has been in charge of the debates ever since. And in the years since 1988, the leaders of the big two parties have maintained control of the commission. Frank Fahrenkopf, the longest-serving chair of the RNC, is still co-chairman. He never left. And the other co-chairman is now Mike McCurry, who is President Bill Clinton's former press secretary. So yes, a Clinton insider is the co-chairman of the Commission on Presidential Debates. And the results of this collusion are clear. Debates are now carefully orchestrated campaign events. The parties together create memoranda of understanding that determine the times of the debates, the locations, the corporate sponsors, the audience, and the moderators. And most importantly, they decide. The Republicans and Democrats together decide who gets to participate. And so the debates for the 2016 presidential election are set to begin in just a few weeks. The first one is scheduled for September 26th. And the Commission on Presidential Debates says in order to be included, a candidate has to be on the ballot in enough states to be able to mathematically win the presidency, which is a qualification that both Gary Johnson and Jill Stein have already achieved. However, the Commission on Presidential Debates has a second qualification, which is that they say a candidate has to get 15% in the polls to be included, which is bullshit because polls are bullshit. First of all, even the most reputable of polling organizations, like the Pew Research Center, they usually only poll likely voters, which means that a large percentage of the yet-to-show-up millennial generation is being completely ignored. Also, a lot of us, even if we do vote in the younger generation, only uses cell phones. We don't have landlines. Now, cell phones are called by polling people, but the law says that cell phones have to be manually dialed, like with fingers, where landlines can be robo-dialed with computers. Lazy humans like the computer dialing, which leads to landline owners, basically the grandparent generation, getting more of the polling phone calls. In fact, the only time that I've ever personally participated in a poll is when I answered the landline at my mother's house. And she was not pleased when I told the caller that I would never vote for George W. Bush, because at the time, my mother had an 8x10 photo of George and Laura on her fridge. And so that's another thing. People can screw with the pollers. You know, these people wanted to call my mom. They wanted my reliable Republican voting mother, but they got her obnoxious daughter instead. And so that's one way that polls can be and are manipulated. You can skew the results by only polling the people who are likely to tell you exactly what you want to hear. In addition to that, the questions themselves can be manipulated. For instance, the Pew Research Center, when they call people, will list the names of the candidates. Now, they'll alternate who's listed first amongst the Democrat and Republican candidates, but Gary Johnson and Jill Stein are always listed after the big two, making them always inferior by default. Other pollsters might not list names or parties at all, which makes name recognition a major factor when grandma has to think of a name to give the nice man on the phone. And so I don't believe any polls ever. They are all manipulative predictions of the future. The only poll that matters is the one taken by the Federal Election Commission based on your actual votes on November 8th. The rest of them are just noise designed to drum up fake drama and ratings on the boob tube. But speaking of the boob tube, the Commission on Presidential Debates has decided that it's boob tube polls that will determine who's going to be in the debates. The 5 polls that are going to be used to determine if Gary Johnson and Jill Stein get to debate are 1, a combo ABC Washington Post poll, number 2, CBS New York Times, number 3, CNN and the Opinion Research Corporation, number 4 is just Fox News, and then the 5th is NBC/Wall Street Journal. These are not independent polls. These are big media organizations that take massive amounts of money in the form of advertising from the parties and the candidates themselves. The parties, Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton in particular, are important customers to every one of these media organizations, except for maybe the Opinion Research Corporation. But that poll is with CNN, and you see commercials for candidates on CNN all the time. This is a huge conflict of interest by allowing these media organizations to conduct the polls that determine debate eligibility. And so basically, the moral of this story is that the presidential debate process is simply rigged by the collusion of the Republican and Democratic parties. It's just that simple. And at this point, it is still unclear if Gary Johnson or Jill Stein are going to be allowed to participate because neither is officially polling at the 15% threshold that the leaders of the big two parties have pulled out of their asses. And so, big picture. The big two parties pretend to be enemies, but we know they are literally partners. Both parties seem to be okay with the other one in power. And so what is the tie that binds them? Well, I think it's their main constituencies, multinational corporations and rich people who give Republicans and Democrats boatloads of cash. From congressmen, in return for their cash, the rich people and the companies get laws that help them in their endless quest for growth and profit. And from the president, the country's main law enforcement officer, they get away with the crimes that they commit. And in some cases, they get taxpayer money to keep their businesses from failing. And so basically, and I think that this is news to no one, but basically the parties have proven that they are both corrupt to the core. And this year, these two corrupt parties have presented us with 2 extraordinarily dangerous candidates for commander-in-chief of the armed forces, neither of whom I can sit by and quietly watch waltz into the presidency. Now, I went into this about Trump and Hillary in particular in great detail in Congressional Dish number 126, the presidential primary. But real quick, because this might be your first episode, I'll explain to you why these two people are so dangerous. First, Donald Trump. He is not a good choice for president for so many reasons that I'm honestly struggling to understand how this isn't obvious to everyone. But as a businessman, he has operated with no morals or ethics. His Trump University appears to have been a big scam. He cheated construction contractors out of a lot of money that he owed them. He blames our country's problems on immigrants while hiring them to work for him for cheap. And that's the thing. Most of us in this country are paycheck earners with bosses. And Trump is a boss, and he's a mean one at that. You know, he made a whole TV show about firing people, and his business practices show that he doesn't respect us workers. He uses us workers. We are human capital to Trump. We're his labor costs. And he's made many, many millions by keeping his labor costs, our paychecks, as low as possible. This man is a corporation. He defines himself by the amount of money he has collected through the multinational corporation that bears his name in giant, obnoxious letters. But the point is that if you're concerned with all of the power that the corporations have over us and over our government, making a walking, talking corporation the head of law enforcement in our country is not wise. But most importantly to me is the commander-in-chief position. And quite frankly, he's a wild card. I've watched his speeches live and unedited, and he's simply inconsistent. You know, sometimes he talks super tough.
Immediately after taking office, I will ask my generals to present to me a plan within 30 days to defeat and destroy ISIS. This will require military warfare, but also cyber warfare, financial warfare, and ideological warfare.
And he seems like he's going to be the best friend of the military-industrial complex. But then sometimes he says exactly what I want to hear.
If I become president, the era of nation building will be brought to a very swift and decisive end.
And so we don't really know what we're going to get with Donald Trump. But what we do know about him, we know, and I'm picking these words carefully, I'm not just calling names here, but we know that Donald Trump is narcissistic. He really is very confident in his own abilities. And we also know that he's vindictive. Anytime someone says something mean about him, he goes like full force in attack mode against them. And when you control the world's largest military, that's dangerous. He's just dangerous. But just as dangerous, if not more so, is the Democratic Party's choice for Commander-in-Chief Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton has been in government a long time. She certainly has experience. But that experience, when you inspect her record, has proven that she makes terrible decisions, and thousands of people have died as a consequence. You know, let's look at her votes as senator. She voted yes on the 2001 authorization for the use of military force. That is a disastrous vote because that is still being used to this day to bomb people all over the world. In fact, we bombed 6 countries over Labor Day weekend. We bombed Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Libya, Somalia, and Yemen. And 5 out of 6 of those are authorized using that 9/11 authorization for the use of military force that Hillary Clinton voted for. In that same week, she also voted yes on the Patriot Act. And if you're thinking, okay, well, it was right after 9/11, they did what they had to do. If you see that as an excuse, fine. But in 2005, we knew what the Patriot Act was. We knew that it had unconstitutional spying powers. We knew what kind of a problem that legislation turned into. And in 2005, the Patriot Act came up for reauthorization, and Hillary Clinton voted yes. She voted yes. And then there's the Iraq War. You know, the Iraq War was launched by the other party. It was launched by George W. Bush. And there were people, I saw it for myself, all over the world who were protesting against the Iraq War. At the time, there were plenty of people that knew that that was a terrible idea. Hillary Clinton voted yes. And then this doesn't have to do with war, but it's another vote that I think matters. There was also the bank bailout. The banks perpetrated a massive fraud against the entire world. There was all kinds of law breaking going on. And they came to Congress and said, we want $700 billion. And she voted yes. And I don't think it's any coincidence that as she is running for president, she has been given $47.5 million from her number one contributing industry, the securities and investment industry, the one she bailed out with that vote. And so those are the bad decisions she made as a member of Congress. How about the bad decisions she made as Secretary of State? Well, one of the main examples of bad decisions is that email server. Because since 1995, it has been crystal clear that federal records, including emails, of federal officials, like the Secretary of State, must be preserved according to the Federal Records Act and the Freedom of Information Act, which say that the public is allowed to know what public servants do and records about their work for the government have to be kept. My work for Congressional Dish and the work of every journalist covering our government depends on these laws. Also, since 2005, well before she became Secretary of State in 2009, it has been clear policy that day-to-day operations, including sending emails, should be done on authorized government systems for security reasons, and any exceptions have to have security safeguards and must be pre-approved by security officials. As Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton made a bad, probably criminal decision to not use the government-provided email system and instead paid a guy under the table to install and maintain a private email server in her home. Now, this is different from using a personal email account. She didn't use a Gmail or something that kept records. Hillary Clinton purposefully installed a secret private server in her home, which would ensure that only she and her staff would decide what would be seen by the people outside of her inner circle and what would not. And by the way, this is a rabbit hole far too deep for today, but there was a lot of Clinton Foundation business going on through that server. Now, the FBI has already investigated her mishandling of classified information. It has not yet investigated the violations of those public disclosure laws. But even though they decided not to prosecute her, the FBI Director Jim Comey said,
"Although we did not find clear evidence that Secretary Clinton or her colleagues intended to violate laws governing the handling of classified information, there is evidence that they were extremely careless in their handling of very sensitive, highly classified information."
They also said that the server in her basement was handling classified information and that it was not secure.
From the group of 30,000 emails returned to the State Department in 2014, 110 emails in 52 email chains have been determined by the owning agency to contain classified information at the time they were sent or received. None of these emails should have been on any kind of unclassified system, but their presence is especially concerning because all of these emails were housed on unclassified personal servers, not even supported by full-time security staff like those found at agencies and departments of the United States government, or even with a commercial email service like Gmail.
Hillary Clinton also straight up lied to us when she said in 2015,
"Everything I did was permitted by law and regulation."
But that was a lie because the Inspector General's report says, quote, "The Inspector General found no evidence that the Secretary requested or obtained guidance or approval to conduct official business via a personal email account on her private server," unquote. And if she had asked, the Inspector General's report said that the government, quote, "did not and would not approve of her exclusive reliance on a personal email account to conduct department business," unquote. Simply put, she broke the law. But the Justice Department, currently headed by Obama administration appointees, isn't going to prosecute her because they can't prove that she risked classified information on purpose. They know she did it, but they can't prove intent. However, it's important to remember that the FBI hasn't investigated her breaking of those public records laws yet. But wait, there's more, because after she left the State Department and broke the law again by turning over exactly none of her emails voluntarily, and then got caught when Freedom of Information Act requests turned up no emails at all at the State Department, Hillary Clinton then had her lawyers determine which of her emails from her time as Secretary of State would be released to the public. And she didn't give us all of them. Here's FBI Director Comey.
The FBI also discovered several thousand work-related emails that were not among the group of 30,000 emails returned by Secretary Clinton to State in 2014.
And her people made sure that the emails they wanted deleted stayed deleted.
It's also likely that there are other work-related emails that they did not produce to State and that we did not find elsewhere and that are now gone because they deleted all emails they did not produce to State, and the lawyers then cleaned their devices in such a way as to preclude complete forensic recovery.
Now, it's possible, as her defense to this email thing would have us all believe, that she's simply careless and dumb, which would disqualify her for the presidency. But I don't think so. This is the behavior of a liar who wants to keep things secret from us. And it's the behavior of someone who considers herself above the law, which she might be. Anyone else would have at the very least had their security clearance stripped, and more likely had been thrown in jail for breaking at least 3 laws: the laws that require safekeeping of classified information, the Federal Records Act, and the Freedom of Information Act. As someone who is devoting my life to keeping track of what my government does in my name, I don't want the head law enforcement officer of this country to be a lawbreaker who lies and hides information from the public. But even more important than that, let's not forget here that her job that she used that secret email server for was Secretary of State. Her job was to be our head diplomat. Her job was to be the head peacemaker. And in that experience, she failed. There's no peace in Iraq or Afghanistan. We're still fighting in both countries. And Hillary Clinton is directly responsible for our involvement in overthrowing Muammar Gaddafi and regime changing in Libya. You know, a month ago, I did an episode on the overthrow of Libya. It was Congressional Dish 131, and I honestly think it's one of the best I've ever done, and I highly recommend you listen to it. But what I learned in researching that episode is that Muammar Gaddafi, who was the president of Libya, was not the monster that we were led to believe. He was overthrown by Hillary Clinton and her partners in France and Britain because he was challenging the global economic order. He was challenging the dominance of the West. He wanted to unite Africa and was taking very important steps to do so. And so her solution to that so-called problem was to have him overthrown and killed. And I didn't put this in that episode, but it's been haunting me now for a month. I can't stop thinking about it, so I'm going to share it with you now. But this was Hillary Clinton's reaction. Remember, she was directly responsible for this. This was Hillary Clinton's reaction when she found out that Muammar Gaddafi had been killed.
Yes, we came, we saw, he died.
You know, I was a big fan of the show The West Wing during the Bush years, my awakening years. I remember thinking constantly how much I wished President Bartlet was real. During the season finale of season 3, and I know this is fictional, but this is where my brain goes, President Bartlet decided to assassinate a foreign leader. He decided to assassinate Omar Sharif, the president of Kumar. And I would hope that if a terrible decision had to be made like that in real life, it would be made in the same manner with the same seriousness that the fictional President Bartlet made that decision.
Civilians get trials.
I'd argue he's not a civilian. So would the Attorney General.
They're gonna find out it's us. We can make it look like the plane went down, but they're gonna find out it's us. And I'm gonna be running for re-election while I'm fighting a war against Kumar.
That's why you want to say no.
I want him tried.
That can't happen.
I understand.
I was talking this morning about how Mallory names all the lobsters in the tank.
Yeah.
Would it be helpful if I brought you a list of names of Sharif's victims?
What do you want from me?
Who was the monk who wrote, "I don't always know the right thing to do, Lord, but I think the fact that I want to please you pleases you"? I have 2 minutes, sir.
This isn't a matter of religion.
Yes, sir.
I recognize that there's evil in the world.
What is your objection exactly, sir?
Doesn't this mean we join the League of Ordinary Nations?
That's your objection. I'm not going to have any trouble saying the Pledge of Allegiance tomorrow.
It's not my objection.
Sir,
It's just wrong. It's absolutely wrong.
but you have to do it anyway.
Why?
Because you won.
And instead, in real life, we get...
Yes, we came, we saw, he died.
There's a callousness there. There's an ease to which she killed a person, another foreign leader, that I can't get around that. And what's worse is that this woman with actual experience starting multiple wars, she's promising more dead people. Here's what she said to the Council on Foreign Relations, who are the masters of the universe. These people are the heads of government and business. Here's what she said about Iraq and Syria right before the campaign season began late last year.
A more effective coalition air campaign is necessary, but not sufficient. And we should be honest about the fact that to be successful, airstrikes will have to be combined with ground forces actually taking back more territory from ISIS.
More drones, more bombs, more people with guns, more death. This is what she's promising. When it comes to the commander-in-chief position, you want World War III? Vote HRC.
An immediate war against an urgent enemy and a generational struggle against an ideology with deep roots will not be easily torn out. It will require sustained commitment in every pillar of American power. This is a worldwide fight, and America must lead it.
I just can't vote for that. And so, for the first time in my lifetime, we're not looking at a lesser of two evils situation, but a straight up two evils situation here. Hillary Clinton is not safer than Donald Trump, but I don't think Donald Trump is safer than Hillary Clinton. I honestly don't know which candidate is more dangerous. The wild card, narcissistic, multinational corporation in a human body named Trump, or the above-the-law, shady war launcher with a vagina named Hillary Clinton. They're both completely unacceptable to me. In this entire election season, I can't seem to get this David Ippolito song out of my head.
Well, I'm an independent voter and I'm feeling blue, 'cause this election year I don't know what to do. I know that each American should have a voice, but give me a break, man, look at the choice. If I can't find a candidate that I love, why can't I vote for none of the above?
And here's the thing, guys. I've been feeling pretty low about this whole presidential election thing, except there's hope. We actually can vote for none of the above. It's possible. And that's what I discovered from studying the details of the f***ed up Electoral College system. We can vote for none of the above, and it can become president on January 20th of 2017. So here's how this works. The Electoral College is the crappy system agreed upon by the founders of our country, some of whom wanted Congress to pick our president, and some of whom wanted us voters to have some say in our democracy. And the Electoral College was their far from perfect compromise. The way it works is, like I said before, we go to the polls to suggest how we want the 538 total electors to vote for president. Now, even though at the time of this recording, there are still 21 states that allow electors to do whatever the hell they choose, the vast majority of the time, the electors do follow the voters. So even if the news that your vote is basically a suggestion is disheartening, and I get it, it is to me too, but even if that's bothering you, it's still worth it to show up, especially this year when a legal voter-created coup is possible. So the way that most of us are familiar with picking the president is that a president can be anointed when a candidate gets over half of the electors, when a candidate gets over 270 Electoral College votes. That's the magic number. In most of the states, the way it works is that the candidate who wins the majority of our votes in that state gets every one of that state's electoral votes. It's a winner-take-all system by state. And only 2 states in the union do it differently, Maine and Nebraska. But those 2 states combined only have 9 out of the 538 total electors, and so the vast majority of the states are winner-take-all. Now, because of this state-by-state winner-takes-all-the-electors system, in a close election, it's possible for someone to win the popular vote and lose the Electoral College and the presidency. And this has happened 4 times in our history. Now, every one of us of voting age here in the United States was alive in the year 2000 when this happened in the George W. Bush versus Al Gore election. In that election, Al Gore got 543,895 more votes than W. Bush. But W. Bush got 537 more votes than Al Gore in winner-takes-all Florida, which meant that W. Bush got all of Florida's electoral votes and won the Electoral College and the presidency by getting a total of 271 Electoral College electors. It could not have been any closer. In addition, the president has lost the popular vote but won the presidency 3 other times in our history. It happened in 1824, 1876, and 1888, with the election of 1888 being the most egregious. In that election, the winner, Benjamin Harrison, only got 49.6% of the popular vote. He got less than half of the popular vote, but that equaled 58.1% of the Electoral College, so a total mismatch. And so that mess is possible, obviously, when there are 2 candidates. But this year is a different year. This is a year when a significant number of us are seriously considering voting outside of the Republican and Democratic parties. And so it got me to wondering, what happens when a candidate doesn't get 270? Well, that's where things get really weird and interesting, because if no one gets 270 electors, like I said earlier, the House of Representatives picks the president. Which means, as I've been telling you now for 4 years, your vote for the House of Representatives is the most important vote you have for federal office because it even ultimately determines your vote for president. I simply cannot overstate how important your vote for the House of Representatives is. That one counts. That one matters. And even if you're pissed about the presidential thing, you have to show up every 2 years and vote for the House. It matters so much. And the thing is that having the House of Representatives pick the president, this has happened before. In 1824, there were 4 candidates who ran for president, a lot like this year. Andrew Jackson got most of the votes from the voters and in the Electoral College, but he didn't get a majority. He didn't get 270. And so when the House of Representatives voted as states, the House of Representatives picked John Quincy Adams instead, and he became the president. And so the House of Representatives has picked the president before and could easily be put in the position to pick the president again. And here's the part that blew me away when I read it. When the House of Representatives votes, they will pick between the top 3 candidates for president who get the most electoral votes, not 2, the top 3, which means that this spoiler will be eligible for the presidency. And it's also proof that we don't have a 2-party system, even though the big 2 parties are trying like hell to create one. But it's this dynamic, the fact that 3 people will be eligible for the ballot in the House of Representatives, that disqualifies Jill Stein as a realistic contender. This is why it has to be Gary Johnson. Now, first of all, I just want to put it out there that I like Jill Stein, and I actually voted for her in 2012. I like her a lot. But she has a math problem in the Electoral College because her name is not going to be printed on the ballot in 6 states. This is confirmed. In Nevada, South Dakota, and Oklahoma, she is straight up not an option. And then in Indiana, North Carolina, and Georgia, people are allowed to write her in, but let's be serious here. If your name isn't printed, you're not on the ballot. And so she has no realistic chance in 6 states. And what this means is that if you add up the Electoral College votes that she's ineligible for, it totals 58 out of 538. That's 11%. That's a significant disadvantage. Is it impossible? No, but Gary Johnson is on everyone's ballots. He's eligible in all 50 states, and that's a factor that you should know. But even more important, when no candidate hits 270 electors, the House of Representatives in the new Congress will pick our next president on their first day in office, which this year would be January 6th, 2017. Now, real quick, an important thing to know about how this vote would go down in the House of Representatives is that it's not one person, one vote. Instead, it's one state, one vote. And so instead of having 435 total votes in the House, as it is on any other day with any other vote, there would only be a total of 50, which is heinously unfair to those of us living in big states. For example, I'm in California, which has 53 districts, which means that my representative's vote counts for 1/53rd of the vote from the representatives from Alaska, Delaware, North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, Vermont, Wyoming, which are all small states that only have one congressman. It's crazy, it's stupid, and it's unfair, but those are the rules, and so I guess we just have to deal with it. But anyway, we don't yet know which party will be controlling the House of Representatives in the 115th Congress, as every single member of the House is up for election on November 8th. So let's run through the possible scenarios and see which candidate would be our best play if we want to deny both Trump and Hillary the presidency. So first, let's take a look at Jill Stein. Jill Stein is the Green Party candidate who, like I said before, is eligible for 89% of the Electoral College electors, so she is at a disadvantage. But if Jill Stein were the 3rd candidate on a ballot with Trump and Hillary in a Democratic Party-controlled House of Representatives, Hillary Clinton would likely win. The Democratic Party establishment is united in support of her. And if Jill Stein were the 3rd candidate on the ballot with Trump and Hillary in a Republican-controlled House of Representatives, well, then we'd clearly end up with a President Trump, as Jill Stein is more liberal than Bernie Sanders and would not be an appealing option for anyone in the Republican Party. So no matter what party wins the House, Jill Stein has almost no chance of winning the presidency. So now let's take a look at Gary Johnson. Well, if Gary Johnson's name was the 3rd name on the ballot with Trump and Hillary in a Democratic House of Representatives, we would end up with Hillary Clinton as president. However, if Gary Johnson were the 3rd name on the ballot in a Republican House of Representatives, well, then things get a lot more interesting. Because many Republican congressmen don't like Donald Trump. Very few of them got up on stage and supported him at the Republican National Convention, and many congressmen refused to even attend the convention because Trump was the nominee. Gary Johnson, as a former Republican governor, would almost definitely split the vote in a Republican House, if not win it outright. And he's also likely to get some Democratic support too in this scenario because faced with the option of Trump or Johnson, many Democrats would rather have Johnson in the White House, as he was a Republican governor in a traditionally blue state, but more importantly, he's not Donald Trump. And so because I simply cannot support Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton, I can't vote for either one. And because I don't see any realistic path for Jill Stein to win the presidency, I'm going to vote for Gary Johnson, despite the many things I disagree with him on, such as his support for free trade agreements like the Trans-Pacific Partnership. But the reason that I am going to vote for him is that the most important issue for me when picking a president, when picking a commander-in-chief, is that person's likelihood to use the authorization for the use of military force, which is still on the books, to get us involved in even more wars. The person who is least likely to use that AUMF to kill even more people. And in this regard, the only person out of Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, and Gary Johnson who is even suggesting that we drop fewer bombs is Gary Johnson. Now, I apologize for the cheesy music here in the background, but here are some clips of Gary Johnson on RT.
Do you think the U.S. is committing war crimes with its drone program?
I do. And it starts right at the top, the fact that these get ordered in the first place, and something that I've maintained for years during the presidential campaign. Look, we're making more enemies. We don't just hit the intended target. And where's the judge and jury when it comes to the intended target? I think that there is a very real Islamic terrorist threat. It's very real. But is it best addressed with our military interventions, with dropping bombs, with flying drones and killing thousands of innocent civilians? I think our military interventions are making things worse, not better.
And so out of our three realistic options, Gary Johnson is the only one talking about stopping the bombs. And so I can deal with all of the things I don't like about him, including the fact that he's a little dopey. But the thing is, I'll take dopey over dangerous any day. And so as far as, a none of the above option is concerned, Gary Johnson's not that bad, and at least he'll legalize my weed. And I honestly think that there will be enough Democrats in the House of Representatives that see it the same way, especially when they compare Gary Johnson to their other Republican option, Donald Trump. And so Gary Johnson could win the presidency if we get this election into the House of Representatives. But that's the if. We have to get it there. And so now, strategically, if there's anyone on the Gary Johnson campaign listening, or if you can get this information to the Johnson campaign, a wise move for that campaign would be to focus hard on the smallest states in the country. Because remember, most states are winner take all, and he's going to need to win at least a state or two, preferably more, to make this work. He has to spoil that 270 for Trump and Hillary. But the good/horrible news here is that our votes, when respected by the electors, count more if you're living in a small state. The reason for this is the way that the 538 electors are divided amongst the states. Instead of being fairly distributed by population among the states, it's done by congressional representation. And so in Congress, every state has 2 senators and at least 1 representative in the House for a minimum of 3 representatives in Congress. And so each state has a minimum of 3 electors in the Electoral College. Also, Washington, D.C. gets 3 Electoral College votes, and so that's 535 members of Congress, plus 3 extra for Washington, D.C., and that's how you get the 538 total electors that determine the presidency. But that screws with the population-determined electors. So here's a clip from an excellent YouTube video that I've embedded for you in the show notes explaining how this shakes out to give small state residents bigger votes than the votes for those of us that live in the bigger states.
For example, there are 11.5 million people in Ohio, so to fairly represent them, it should get 20 electoral votes. But the Electoral College doesn't give Ohio 20 votes, it only gets 18, 2 less than it should. Where those other votes go? To states like Rhode Island. Plucky Rhode Island has 1.1 million people in it, so it should have about 2 votes, but instead it gets 4. Those extra 2 votes that should be representing Ohioans go to representing Rhode Islanders instead. Why? Because, according to the rules of the Electoral College, every state, no matter how few people live there, gets 3 votes to start with before the rest are distributed according to population. Because of this rule, there are a lot of states with a few people that should only have 1 or 2 votes for president, but instead get 3 or 4. So Georgians, Virginians, Michiganders, and Jerseyites are each missing 1 vote. Pennsylvanians, North Carolinians, Ohioans, and Hoosiers are missing 2, Floridians are missing 4, New Yorkers 5, Texans 6, and Californians are 10 votes short of what they should get. Because of this vote redistribution, the Electoral College essentially pretends that fewer people live where they do and more people live where they don't. In some cases, the Electoral College bends the results just a little, but if you live in a particularly large or small state, it bends them a lot. One Vermonter's vote, according to the Electoral College, is worth 3 Texans' votes, and one Wyomingite's vote is worth 4 Californians.
So, small state residents, you matter more in just about every way in presidential election years. It's not fair, but it is what it is. And speaking of not fair, but is what it is, I do also have to make sure I tell you about the vice president. Because if no one gets the needed electors to just win it outright and the House of Representatives picks the president, the vice president gets picked separately by the Senate. And the Senate ballot will only have 2 names, meaning that Gary Johnson's chosen vice president, Bill Weld, wouldn't even be eligible. And since the Senate is also controlled by Republicans this year, that means that Mike Pence, Donald Trump's running mate, would likely be the vice president regardless of who wins the presidency in the House. I told you the Electoral College was fucked up. But that's the thing. When it comes to presidential elections, the truth is we have very little power. Our power, as I've preached to you for 4 years and counting, is in Congress. But the thing is that your choices for Congress and the president are on the same piece of paper. They're on the same ballot. So we might as well vote for president while we're there voting for what really matters, Congress. But what's really fun for me, just doing this whole thought experiment with like, what would happen, is that I love the idea of us voters who never get polled and are so disgusted by the parties that we don't belong to and the crappy candidates that they've selected for us. You know, I love the idea of all of us flying into this election from the shadows like poltergeists and fucking everything up by voting for Gary Johnson. I just think it's so fun. And the other thing, too, is what's the worst that can happen? Okay, maybe Hillary or Trump win despite us. Okay, at least we tried. Or we could end up with the only possible anti-war candidate as president. And that would be pretty sweet. The way I see it, we have nothing to lose. And so I say we try it. And if you don't like my idea, or if you still want Trump or Hillary for whatever reason, fine, vote however you want. But I just tricked you into learning about the Electoral College. So, Congressional Dish for the win! So this is the last time I'm going to discuss the presidential election on this podcast until the election is over. I've gotten your emails, I've gotten your tweets asking me how I'm actually going to vote. I told you how I voted in the primary. Now I've told you how I'm going to vote in the general. I have nothing else to say about it. But doing this episode and looking into the Electoral College, I've got to tell you that it only reaffirmed, as I think I've said, at least 2 times in the episode, that Congress is the most important thing. It's the thing that we have the most control over, and it controls the most. It's Congress that makes the laws. And so from now until the election, you can expect every episode of Congressional Dish to be about Congress. I can tell you that I'm working on the Every Student Succeeds Act. There were 2 versions of this thing. The House one was the Student Success Act, which is what I keep calling it. But the final version was the Every Student Succeeds Act. And so that is what I'm reading. It's 500 pages. I have to watch a bunch of hearings because, it changed the No Child Left Behind Act, which was before my time, so I didn't read that. So this is going to be a really complicated bill. In fact, out of all the bills that I've done, with the exception of Obamacare, this is the most intimidating. So I'm working on that. In the meantime, you can expect an interview with the chief of staff of a retiring Republican congressman. Got some really good insights there. And then the last episode before the election is going to be the story of the 114th Congress, where I just summarize the whole thing before you vote. And then it's voting time. We only have 3 more episodes left, so we're coming right down to the wire here. But if you support this mission, if you support me telling you what's going on in Congress to the best of my ability, and supporting everything I say with very detailed show notes where you can go and look at all of the sources, because you don't know me and you shouldn't trust me and you shouldn't trust anyone in the media. You should demand that their sources be provided to you, and Congressional Dish does that. If this is something you support, I would hope that you would support it in financial form, because I don't accept advertising. I got another person just a couple days ago asking to advertise, this time on the Congressional Dish website, and I had to turn it down because we don't accept advertising here because of the corrupting influence of corporate money in everything. I'm not going to participate. And instead, we're doing the value for value model, which means that I give you this product, I give you Congressional Dish for free, and you're expected to return that value in some kind of financial form in whatever amount you think is fair. I leave that up to you. And so what some people are doing is they're subscribing, which is a amount every month that they're contributing to Congressional Dish, which is great because it helps me budget. People are subscribing with both paper checks sent to the P.O. Box, the address you can find on the support page on congressionaldish.com. And we also have people who subscribe via PayPal because they want to use their credit card. And then we also have people that contribute however much they want, as often as they choose, in what I call one-time contributions, although so many of these people, it's more than one time. So thank you to all of you who do that. And then also we get support from Amazon. I mean, not from Amazon. Amazon doesn't pay me, but it's you. Every time you use Amazon, if you enter through the search box on congressionaldish.com, then Congressional Dish gets a commission. And that is adding up to being a decent amount of money. So thank you for using the Amazon search box too. And that's a good one that you can use and it costs you nothing. But however you choose to contribute, I do hope that you contribute in some way if you are getting value from this podcast, because this is a full-time gig and reading the Student Success Act is a real bitch. So I could definitely use your help. But again, all of your options for contributing to Congressional Dish are on the support page on congressionaldish.com. And thank you to all of you who already have. So speaking of people who have contributed to the podcast, I want to thank those of you who have contributed since the last episode. And I am happy to say that we have 4 new subscribers. Thank you to John Jodell, who is now contributing $10 a month. Thank you to Brandon Wickwire, who is now contributing also $10 a month. And I am very excited to welcome back Jeremy Beck, who was a subscriber, had to bounce for a little while, and is now back at the amount of $10 a month. So thank you, all of you, John, Brandon, and Jeremy. I'm so happy to have you on board. And then last, we have a new subscriber, Ricard Kvarak, who is now contributing $6 a month. So thank you, Ricard. And then we also have some one-time contributions. And I've got to tell you guys that this is going to be a short thank you section because we're a little light on the contributions. I hope that turns around. Jose Huerta, who has contributed so many times, has contributed another $208.22, definitely the biggest one of the week. And Jose left another note who says, Jen, as always, keep up the awesome work. Thank you for all you do. Have an awesome week. Your friend, Jose Huerta. Thank you, Jose. You saved my week with this generous check, so thank you very much. We also got a $120 check, and this says it's a 1-year subscription from Matthew Jameson of Campobello, South Carolina. What's up, South Carolina? Don't see you guys too often. But Brent says, Dear Jen, thank you so much for everything you do on Congressional Dish. I think the show is fantastic, and I make sure to listen to each new episode that comes out. Knowledge about what's going on in Congress is essential to our democracy, and your show makes it easier to digest current news in government. I hope the show continues to be a success. Yours sincerely, Brent Jameson. Brent, with your help, it will continue. So thank you very much for doing your part. And I agree with you that knowing what's going on in Congress is essential, which is why that's what we're focusing on from now on. We also got 2 anonymous contributions in the amount of $100. So you know who you are. Thank you very much. And then my good friend Steve McMahon has contributed another $100, and Steve left me a note. This note says, Jen, hang in there. If those assholes don't like your tone, let them do the work. You are appreciated. I know you're a bit behind on your reading list, but I couldn't help myself. Command and control should be arriving at your P.O. box. Awesome. I thought I would share how close we have come to a nuclear accident, since there is now work in government to upgrade Minuteman missiles. I thought it was time to expand your list of topics to worry about. Thanks. Remember, there are a lot of us who appreciate and support you. Steve McMahon of Haver, Montana, and he says, I am pronouncing it correctly. So thank you. It's so sad how many times you've written to me and I just can't keep that word, the pronunciation correct in my head. But yeah, thanks for the book. It's not here now, but I imagine it'll be here by the next episode. So thank you very much. And I've seen a lot of stuff about our nuclear arsenal and upgrading it too. It's going to cost us many tens of billions of dollars. And so I'm going to keep an eye out for that in the next government funding law, which, by the way, so Congress is back in session. They've been back in session for a couple of days, and it is looking more and more likely like they're going to take the government funding for this year and just extend it into December, so that in December we get another monster government funding law right before Christmas that nobody reads, that's full of all kinds of goodies. And it's in the lame duck Congress when a lot of these people are going to be unaccountable because they've already been fired. So this year's government funding law is shaping up to be quite a mess. And it's exactly how I predicted it would go down. So that hasn't happened yet. It's going to be a continuing resolution. If it goes into December, that's what we can expect. There are some people that are trying to push it into March, but right now it seems like they are outnumbered. So I will keep you guys updated in the next episode in this thank you section as to what's going on with government funding. But like, I'm not a betting person, but if I was going to bet, I would bet that it's going to be extended until December. So we have another December showdown. Let's see, where were we? All right. So thank you again, Steve. And moving on, we also got $50 from John Anderson. Thank you, John. And John says, thank you for this useful information. I hope you one day provide transcripts or write a book. I love taking notes while listening to your program. Thanks, John. And as for transcripts, I've thought about it, but the thing is that I kind of do this off the cuff and some of my language doesn't make any sense. And I think the show notes are actually better than transcripts because I want you to do your own reading and, expand your own minds and click on the links that you find in those articles. And so right now I'm keeping the show notes the way they are, but I will keep your transcript idea in mind. You're not the first person to ask for it. And then write a book. I don't know when I'd have the time for that, but hey, I'm young. This show is young and who knows? We'll see. But as for right now, Congressional Dish is all I can give you. And thank you for contributing for what I am already providing. I really appreciate it. We also got $40 from William Colson. And William says, hello, Jen. I've wanting to send you an email to tell you thanks for all you do with Congressional Dish. I've been listening to your podcast for a while, and it has opened my eyes about the BS that's going on with our so-called awesome government. I especially became furious after listening to episode 131 regarding bombing Libya. Being in the military, it's hard for me to imagine that the actions we do in the world are doing more harm than good. Anyways, great job with the podcast and keep up the good work. Peace, William. Thank you, William. I hate to be the bearer of the bad news, that our military, which you are a part of, is being sent to do missions and for reasons that you're not being told. But I mean, we have to learn about it somehow, right? So, I'm not doing this to upset anybody, but I definitely think that the information has to get out there, and it's opened up my mind, and it sounds like it's opened up yours too. So, thank you, William. I appreciate your support so much. Let's see. We also got 2828 from Russ, and Russ is from Seattle. And let's see, he left a note. And on this note, I've got to tell you, on the back of it is a beautiful doodle. I mean, Russ has more talent than I have ever had. So this is actually going to go up on my board and I'm going to keep it forever. So thank you. And then Russ left me a note and I will read you some of it. It says, hi, Jen. I'm a very new listener who started with the episode on John Koskinen and just heard the also excellent episode on Libya. Thus, it's time to pay for some of my education. Thank you for all of your work. And then the rest of this note is for me. But Russ, thank you very much for this contribution and for your note and your art. This is really beautiful. So thank you very much. And I hope you continue drawing. And if you contribute again, I would love to see more of your work. So thank you very, very much. We also got another $25 from Bruce Kerr. Nice to see you back, Kerr. Kerr, are we like friends now? Like, do I just call you by your last name? But thank you, Bruce. You've contributed $25 and he says, I love your show. Thank you very much. We also got another $25 from our good friend Victor Kitt. Great to see your name again. Thanks, Victor. We got $25 from Allison Traub of Ontario, Canada. Thank you, Canada. And we got $20.60. This is the third contribution from Laura Smith of Culver City, California. Thank you, Laura. We also got $10 from Peter Persley, and Peter has contributed before, but I did get it confirmed that Peter is an aspiring podcaster. So like I told you in the email, let me know if you need help. I am always down to help more people get their voices heard. So Peter, thank you for the contribution, and I look forward to helping you launch your own project. We also got another $10 contribution from Reed Holland. This is his second contribution, so thank you, Reed. And we got another contribution from Ethan Avery. And Ethan, I keep saying your name. I'm pretty sure that that's a subscription, but regardless, thank you. And then we got more money from my good friend Bud Johnson. I love Bud's cards. And let's see, this time, one of the envelopes came with a typed note, which is honestly easier for me to read. And this one says, Jennifer, yo, I am way behind on the podcast. I'm just being honest. Keep up the good work, because if I see any more of Hillary or Frump, I will get violently ill. Oh, and our Congress sucks. Keep up the good fight. Hugs, Bud. Thanks, Bud. I agree with you. I am so happy to be done with paying attention to Hillary and Trump. I've made up my mind. And I'm just turning the rest of it off until the debates, of course, because I'm going to watch that, because who isn't going to watch that? It's going to be quite the shit show. And then we got another $5 check from Bud, and this one was for the Libya episode. So thank you, dear. We also got $5 from Joshua Graff. Thank you, Joshua. And then last, we got $3 from Soren Nitzoy of Oak Park, Illinois. So thank you, Soren. And just so you guys know, I also do accept Bitcoin. I don't know why I've stopped telling you that, but you can also find the Bitcoin buttons on the support page on congressionaldish.com. All right, I have a birthday party that I need to get to. Happy birthday, Lucero. So I need to get the hell out of this apartment because my train leaves in exactly 13 minutes. So I hope you guys have a great week. I will be giving you, I think the next episode is going to be the interview one, and then I'll do the Student Success Act because I'm already really struggling with this one. So until you hear my voice again at the end of the interview episode, I really appreciate your support. I hope you guys have a great couple of weeks, and I will talk to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
We're surrounded now by liars coming at us through our TV screens.
We don't have a domestic spying program.
They're content to fight in black and white despite the many in-betweens. We got a president who plays with the facts. And then he waves a flag to cover his tracks. As if a lie is alright, if the end will justify the means. Now we are so damn tired of being lied to.
The polar ice caps aren't going away.
We don't think we can deny it anymore. You can stick to your story if you think it flies. But we're not keeping quiet anymore. We are so damn tired of being lied to.
Government jobs consume the profits of the private sector.
We don't think we can deny it anymore. You can stick to your story if you think it flies. But we're not keeping quiet anymore. Now we're not keeping quiet.
These bills represent common sense, bipartisan solutions that actually solve problems.